Welcome back to Eclipse on Tap, the podcast where we talk about eclipses of all kinds and space in general. We have an incredibly special episode for you all here today. Welcome back to the podcast, Dr. Gordon Telepun.
Welcome.
Hey,
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me again. I remember when we did it prior to the eclipse, and it'll be fun to do a little review.
Absolutely. There's been a lot that's happened since the last time we spoke to you. I think that was maybe around this time last year. So in the winter, early spring, or actually maybe even longer ago. It was well before the total solar eclipse in 2024.
Yep.
And we were so inspired by what you shared with us. It got us just pumped up for 2024. We used your app for 2024. We brought a lot of the knowledge you shared with us to where we saw the eclipse in Newcastle, Indiana. So it's great to have you back on.
No, it's good to be on. And I remember your story. You know, you guys, if I remember correctly, you did 2017 without much preparation, and then just really loved the experience, and then did a lot more preparation for 24 with cameras and stuff like that. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Matt is our technical guru here, and he was it the 360 Insta 360 or something you acquired?
Yeah,
we used it for a few things since then, but primarily it was purchased for the eclipse. So we got great 360 footage of the entire eclipse.
Yeah, it was fun to have, just sort of set it up on a tripod in the middle. And what it allowed us to do is just hit record on that camera. We knew it wasn't going to be any sort of special quality, of course, but 360 was quality enough for us. And
yeah, you get the effect of what's going on around you, the surroundings.
Yeah, exactly. Being there and just being able to hit record and then enjoy the eclipse for what it was just on our own. So I think all three of us probably could say that we enjoyed this eclipse more. I mean, Nathan, actually, it was his first time, but for David and I felt more comfortable and I felt like I could relax. David, what were your thoughts on that?
I was just going to say, like, I mean, I brought, I got an 8-inch telescope and had a solar filter for it this time around. But yeah, I think the one thing that we did that meant more than anything was just we got more people to go to the eclipse in our friends group, which is like the whole reason that we started the whole thing that we have now with the podcast. So it was just really cool to get all the people who had not experienced it to go and to see it. And we had a lot of cool people around us and experienced the whole day. It was iffy with the weather, as we all know. Everybody who went to the eclipse knows, but
I know you'll get into that, Gordon. I'm excited for that. It was so sketchy for us, and I know for you as well. So 2024. I guess to maybe kick it off, do you want to talk a little bit about maybe remind our viewers for a quick intro, your background with eclipses, and then maybe where you went for 2024, and then would love to get right into your content.
Sure. I want to say something that just expand on what David just said. So there's a couple of things about eclipses that you guys have already realized after two, that you get better with each eclipse. Your comfort level goes up. Your ability to enjoy all the aspects of an eclipse gets better because you have experience. I mean, there's a lot going on at an eclipse. So you just get better at it. The second thing that David said, which is really true, is you enjoy an eclipse much better if you're enjoying it with people you know. If you are the organizer and you bring people along with you who've never seen their first one and you experience that with them, that's really gratifying. So yeah, David, those 2 points are right on target.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Kudos, David.
Yeah, I mean that's the coolest part, just to see the crew that we had there. I mean, everybody except for like you, me, and my dad had seen one, and just to have Nathan there and Julia and Gary, and we just had a good crew. It was just a lot of fun, and we were literally camping, and we rented a couple of RVs, and we were driving around. Didn't know where we were going to be the day of. It was definitely an adventure.
It was an adrenaline, like the way that we did it. Gordon, I think, you know, we rented the RV, so we were mobile. We could go anywhere we wanted. And the adrenaline, once we got on the road, of like, okay, we're heading to like, let's go to, you know, Northeast Ohio initially.
Mhm.
And then we're kind of watching the weather maps and deciding if we keep heading northeast or if we head back southwest a bit. And then, you know, the night before, we've talked about it on our episode right after it, you know, you're laying there in the camper and the rain's falling down. You're like, oh no. And then to wake up to crystal blue skies and everything, it was a really fun way to experience it, at least for me as a first time eclipse seeker or seer, chaser, yes.
Yeah.
It was just like the adrenaline of the whole experience was just amazing, because we were just like, all right, we're on the road, but we don't know where we're going. We'll figure it out. We're just going to find clear skies.
Yeah, you know, that's a brutal way to do it. I've been so lucky with my eclipses, because I've had clear weather, was able to pre-pick a position and, you know, have a good day. But real eclipse chasing like you did is really stressful.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I will say when we woke up on Monday morning for the eclipse, and it was clear skies, blue skies, absolute elation from us. I mean, it was similar to how we felt with this audio issue we were having before the episode. A similar level of excitement for sure. So, the full eclipse chasing experience was what we had in 2024, to the point where the day before, deciding, do we go all the way to the Northeast up to Maine, where we feel like we can maybe guarantee it? Do we stay where we're at? That whole back and forth where all of us were bouncing that idea through our mind. Glad we got lucky with our ultimate location, because we certainly didn't have to drive anywhere near as far as maybe we even initially thought we would have. Ended up being fairly close to home for us, like within the 5-hour range. So yeah, so excited to talk more about 2024. I know that you have a ton of content to share, so I definitely want to get into that. So if you're ready, feel free to introduce
Let
it.
me just do that quick little overview of how I got into eclipses, and then we'll go in to talk about the weather in 24.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I've always been interested in astronomy. I knew about the eclipse in 1991 that went through Mexico, and that was like one of the longest ones in our lifetimes. It was 6 minutes and 54 seconds. But I couldn't get to it because I don't know if you guys think about surgical training. You know, I'm a plastic surgeon, and that was my first year of training in plastic surgery. So you can't get a vacation in the summer. That was a July eclipse, and when you're a resident, you can't get a vacation in July. So I couldn't go to that one. The next one that I wanted to get to was in 1998. We went through Aruba, and I could have flown from Alabama to Aruba. But the problem was it was my first year of private practice, and I really couldn't just leave my practice for 5 or 6 days to get back and forth to Aruba. And the weather was a little shaky for that eclipse in Aruba, so I didn't go. So anyway, the first one I could get to was in 2001 in Zambia, Africa. It was in the middle of the dry season, so you know you were going to be able to see it. It was a 3-minute and 54-second eclipse, so that's a reasonable duration. And so I saw that one, and I got hooked. So then I went back to Africa in 2002, saw an eclipse on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean Sea in 2006. Of course, 2017 in Tennessee, went to Argentina for 2019, had to sit out 2020 because of COVID, and then 2024 rolled around, and that was just a great eclipse.
That's fantastic. And I love the story about when you were telling us how you're in medical school and you just couldn't get the time off. I mean, that's the reality with eclipses. Sometimes you can make it work and other times you can't. There's probably going to be a time in our future where we chase an eclipse that maybe we get a little clouded out. It's just the reality of it. It's what makes it so exciting and so exclusive. So with that, if you're ready to go ahead and share your screen, we'd love to dive into your content.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. And I'll just one other thing. That was in my plastic surgery training when I couldn't go in 1991. And then one other story is that when I was at the eclipse in 2001, my first one, I prepared, I practiced, I read everything that Fred Espinick had written. You got to remember back then you didn't have YouTube to help you, so you had to get it from books. And I got to Africa, had all my camera gear set up. I was all ready, to take my photography and be on time. But it's such an overwhelming event, as you guys know, that I was late. I mean, I just messed up my photography. I was late going into C2. I was late getting ready for C3 as I was watching Totality. So that's what inspired me to start the app. So I made the first app for 2002 based on my 2001 experience of not having audible timing. So I made the first Eclipse, audible timer. And back then it ran on Windows and Windows Pocket PC. I mean, it was just ancient. It didn't have geolocation or anything. You had to put your own times in for your contact times manually. But it worked. We used it in 2002. And then, of course, for 2017, with the advent of mobile devices, I rewrote it or I had a developer, a programmer write it for mobile devices, which just automated everything so much better. So yeah, so that's where we are now.
That's awesome.
Do you have any idea how many people utilized your app during the 24 solar eclipse?
So that's a good question. I think I haven't really crunched the exact numbers, but I think it was over 100,000.
Wow.
We were one of them.
Yeah,
we were we were definitely one of them.
The mistake we made was we should have put it on like a loudspeaker, streamed it from a phone. Instead, David was shouting it out, but he was too excited. So
he was relaying.
We were getting every fourth or fifth message you sent out.
And I was even I was actually totally zoned out half the time, just taking everything in. And you would be talking on the app and I would completely just zone out. I was so into what was happening, but it would have been good to have it on speaker for sure.
No, I understand. A lot of people do play it on a speaker, and then the whole crowd that they're with can hear it. I get such great stories about. It's just heartwarming, the stories and the emails I get about people telling me that the app improved their experience, and then I love when people upload their private YouTube videos of like their family in the backyard enjoying the eclipse, and I can hear, my app playing in the background. I mean, it's just wonderful. But look, it doesn't come easy. We had technical problems, and there are people who didn't set it up right, or maybe their phones are glitchy, when it didn't work. Trying to develop and supply a mobile app is not easy. And I take every problem personally when I heard about problems after the eclipse. And, but I mean, look, there's just nothing I can do. I mean, I have good programmers. We did the best we could. Phones are glitchy. A lot of people have other apps running at the same time and they don't shut everything down, although that's kind of in the instructions. I had a lot of downloads the day of the eclipse. And, my app is not, I mean, you have to kind of understand an Eclipse to set it up a little bit. I mean, it's pretty user-friendly, but it's not super basic. So, you download that app 30 minutes before the eclipse, there's a little bit of understanding to go on. So, there's just some problems. It's just the way it's going to be. But overall, the app ran great.
That's awesome. And 100,000, over 100,000 downloads
that's incredible.
is awesome. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's such a testament to all the hard work that went into it. And it is a absolute asset to any Eclipse Chasers toolkit. I think it's especially for photography, all of it. It's awesome.
Yeah. And it was about 55 to 60% Apple downloads. And then the other was Google. So it's a little bit heavier on the Apple side.
I was just going to say, I can definitely attest to its value. For me, being a first-time Eclipse goer, I'm kind of investing. Well, I'm trusting these guys that they're going to get me where I want to be. I mean, we were watching the weather maps and all that kind of thing, but once you're there, you're kind of just you're out in the middle of a cornfield for us, and you're kind of wondering what's going on. We knew about the time first contact, and my dad and David had the solar filters on and we're watching. But as we got closer to the event, time kind of just sneaks up on you, and all of a sudden you're right there on the cusp of totality, and then it hits. And then I found your app very valuable for me, even though I was only getting every fourth or fifth message from David.
Right.
But I found it very valuable just to like stop in the moment, because otherwise it's just any other day and you're sitting in a cornfield, and
Right.
and really understanding like where we're at in terms of the eclipse, and like remembering to look around and kind of take everything in helped me tremendously.
Absolutely. It's hard to get it all in on the first eclipse, and that's why I developed the app, because a lot of people are not going to travel internationally like I have. So people who saw 17 and wanted to do better at 24, the app really helped them, because you kind of know what to expect anyway, and then the app kind of helps you along. And people who are seeing 24 for the first time, there's so much to take in, you miss it. But Nathan, you said another great thing about eclipses. Even with the technology that we have and the Google Maps that we have, and your exact contact time for your position, there is still something so anxiety producing about hearing the call for first contact and waiting 20 or 30 seconds before you can see that first bite out of the sun. It's just great to know you are in the right position, you're in the path, because otherwise the sun just looks like a regular sun on a regular day, and you up
Right.
to the point of first contact, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. It's really surreal. We've relived it a number of times just on the podcast, but you think back to all those moments where, oh man, like I'm here and actually we have first contact, like we're it's happening now,
I know.
Yeah.
And Matt, you uploaded a YouTube video. Didn't I see your video of your day?
Yeah, that was the 360 camera was just an absolute like gem for that. We because we had so many new people with us, like David, myself, and then David and Nathan's dad, my father-in-law. The three of us were the only ones that had ever experienced it. So we were like, okay, we could do some things. I had a DSLR camera that I took photos through a telescope, so I was able to get some pretty good photos. But while that was all happening, we wanted to capture the first experiences in 360 for my wife, for David's very soon-to-be wife, at the time fiance, or soon-to-be fiance. I think it was right before. So regardless, people very close to us that we wanted to just capture their overall experience, and it was perfect for that. We have some clips where you can kind of move the 360 camera around and follow certain people's reactions, and David literally fell to his knees. It was so good. It was just a really special day. But
I saw your video. I remember it was really good. It was fun to watch. Are you ready to want to do the first section?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Sure. Before, as you're pulling that up, was for folks that want to find your app, is there a website? Is it solareclipsetimer.com?
Yeah, solareclipsetimer.com. That's where everything will be updated. I have my programmers working on getting it ready for 2026 now. So I plan to keep it going at least for one or two more eclipses.
Awesome. I just put it up on the screen there for anyone watching this that maybe can take a look, go to the website, learn a little bit about how to use the app. Like you were saying, there is some users instructions required. Not that it's complex by any means, but just take a minute to look at the website, download the app for the next eclipse. So perfect timing. We'll move right into your content.
Yeah. So are you seeing my screen?
Yep. So I'm going to add that to our stage here, and go ahead and let's get into it.
All right, let's just briefly talk about the weather, because that was certainly controversial for 24. So, everybody had seen this map from Jay Anderson. He's the retired meteorologist from Canada who's worked with, Fred Espinick for 30 or 40 years on eclipse meteorology. And I kind of updated it for my talks when I would give presentations, just to make it a little more clear for people. So, the blue area was the best risk of not having clouds, right? The fractional percentage of having clouds was in Mexico, going into the southern border of Texas. And then the middle of the country was considered fair in terms of his risk, the percentage of the predicted cloud cover, about 40 to 45%. And as you got up more north, it got just more and more risky. I mean, you could see it's getting up into the orange, red, 65 to 75% chance of having clouds. But on eclipse day, it was actually almost just the opposite. So this is a GOES map, and I added the path to it, that yellow line. And you can see basically it was opposite. Texas was really risky. A lot of people got clouded out there. The middle of the country was fair up through Ohio, where you guys were. Then people in upstate New York just had really bad luck. I mean, they were right in that cloud bank that was right there. I know people who got clouded out in New York because I gave a talk to the astronomy club in Buffalo. And then Maine and upper New Hampshire actually was best. So the map was kind of flipped, which was crazy. And then this is the map. Those two red dots were my pre-planned observing position. So, I was taking about 25 people or so to this eclipse. So we can't do that in Be Mobile. We can't do that in an RV. We have all sorts of different people from all over coming. So I had to kind of pre-plan two positions. So we had a position pre-planned in Texas where we had reservations. And then I had a secondary place right outside of Cape Girardeau, Missouri, where I had hotel reservations. So those two places were about 600 miles apart. And I figured one of those would be clear on eclipse day. But of course, the percentage of clearing predicted clear weather was in Texas. But of course, that didn't work out. So luckily, I had two positions ready because remember, I'm worried about getting 25 people to the eclipse site. So this is, I was a member of AccuWeather Professional going up to that eclipse so I can monitor the weather. And this is the weather, this is the weather 24 hours before eclipse day. So this is the predicted cloud cover. So this is computer generated predicted cloud cover 24 hours before. So this first panel is low level clouds. Low level clouds are the ones that'll kill you on eclipse day. So you can see Texas was in the red and Missouri was in the black. So it was clear there. And then the mid level clouds, we're still good. We're a little bit better in Texas, but remember, it's the low level clouds. Those are the rain clouds. Those are ones that are going to kill you. And Missouri was clear. And high level clouds look bad in both, but high level clouds are really overread in this model. So you don't really kind of go by that. You go by the low level and the mid level clouds. But I was following this, in the week before the eclipse. And I made the decision to go to Missouri about 3 days before the eclipse. So on Friday, we knew we were all going to Missouri, that we weren't going down to Texas. So let's talk about that.
Yes, for sure. I mean, the weather was such a factor in this eclipse. And David and I talk about it a lot. In 2017, in August, when we went down to Hopkinsville, Kentucky, it was just the spot that we had sort of landed on. We had done some weather following, I think, City was a consideration, but then they had some storms coming through. What was the first one? I'm blanking on Carbondale, Illinois. Yeah. That was our first, actually, I think that was our very first destination. Had to X out a few of those. And so we were certainly following the weather, but not in any granular way. Like we were just like, well, I guess it's Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And we went, and it was, I don't know. Describe how lucky it felt.
It was probably, I think, like 2-3 days before we went down into my dad's basement, which was like the command center. And, we decided we're gonna nix the Carbondale plan and we're gonna go to Hopkinsville, and just drove the day before, spent the night in a hotel, and we had nothing but clear sky. It was an amazing day there.
The bluest of birds.
It was about 90 degrees at 8 a.m., but it was such a beautiful day. And it happened like it was just happened in the blink of an eye, I feel like, the first time around. But it was, we kind of got lucky. But looking back at all the other videos that we saw after the fact, we're very glad we didn't go to Carbondale.
For sure. And that was so I guess with 2024 being it that it was the chase. Like we were, I don't know. I remember being, I think the three of us were sort of, we almost pulled ourselves aside at a certain point and said, like, from the rest of the people we were with, and we were like, okay, so what are we actually going to do here? And it came down to that at times. Like we were at a Chipotle restaurant
I was just going to say,
and it was a stressful time.
Yeah, we had headed to Northeast Ohio. I think we were just south of Cleveland, Findlay or something like that.
Yeah.
And we pulled over
Perrysburg.
Yeah, Perrysburg to get dinner. And we kind of, with the people that we were with, they were like, whatever you guys want to do, we're on board with. We'll go wherever you guys think. But we were having a real serious powwow at dinner over our burritos. Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
And Matt, we'd set it up where it was like, I took the first shift, drove for 3 or 4 hours onto my dad, onto David, Matt, whatever. And in the meantime, anybody who wasn't driving was just looking at different radar models of like, where's going to be the best place to go.
Full-blown mobile studio, weather studio. I wish that we maybe had the access to like the low, medium, and high clouds, because Indianapolis ended up being the greater area, some high clouds. Like we had some
we had
hazy contrail-y looking clouds, and definitely the jets going through were hanging in the vapor up there in that upper echelon of the sky. But we didn't have any lower mid clouds, so we were good, and that's when we knew we were in the clear. But having had that data, I think we would have felt probably more comfortable. But we felt like we were threading the needle, because we knew the weather was going south towards Texas, the bad weather, and up into that section of very northeast of Ohio and up through Buffalo, New York, where it was just like bad news, and then clear
you had to
again.
Find a pocket.
It was truly like a zebra, like good in Mexico, bad in Texas, good in Missouri through Indy, and then bad through Ohio through New York, and then good again through Maine. So we were like just threading the needle. David and I went to bed on the night before, and it was pouring rain on the RV. We were like, I just hope this works.
I barely slept that night.
Same. But we got it right. We got it right, and we were absolutely elated. It was like one of the most special moments ever, because it felt like we worked that much harder for this eclipse.
Sure.
Yeah, we did. And we on the way to Indiana, like we were in Wapakoneta, Ohio. We went to the Armstrong Museum.
That was a good stop
there like the day before. It was great. And I was like a kid in a candy store there. But on the way there, we're looking at maps, we're looking at radar, and I'm like, we mentioned Newcastle, Indiana, and called up a campground that had 2 spots open. We had 2 RVs. It was perfect.
It was destiny. It was perfect.
Wow. So you guys did it great. So a couple of points about that. Back to Hopkinsville in 2017. I don't know if you guys know the story, but I made a site visit to Hopkinsville as a potential place to see it, but also just kind of one of the nuances of eclipses and the way they calculate the contact times is knowing the point of greatest eclipse, which is this line that goes from the sun through the moon to the earth to the center of the earth. And that's kind of where some of the geometry gets calculated from. Well, in 2017, the point of greatest eclipse was right outside of Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And it's hard to get to the point of greatest eclipse. So I visited Hopkinsville and I drove to the point of greatest eclipse. And I walked out on the field. It was private property, but I walked out on the field to stand at the point of greatest eclipse. So what that means is if you're standing at the point of greatest eclipse and at max eclipse, you lean to the altitude of the sun, you lean in the direction, the azimuth of the sun, and you make your body be the altitude of the sun. The line of the Besselian elements from the sun to the moon to the earth is going through your head, through your feet to the center of the earth. So that's a really cool thing about being at the point of greatest eclipse. And I did it in Hopkinsville and did a video about it. The other thing about 17, and you guys didn't go to Carbondale, which was a good move. If you ever watch some videos from the Carbondale eclipse, they had all those people in that college football stadium there, and a cloud came over right at totality. So the people in that stadium, 20 or 30,000 people got clouded out just for the time of totality, so that's just brutal. And the third thing, in 2024, where you had rain the night before, Well, when you're eclipse chasing, that's what you want to do, right? You want to watch the weather. And, our weather systems in the United States generally travel from west to east with a little bit of a a northern slant. So you either want to be in the path way ahead of a front, or you want to drive through the front and let it pass you, so you're on the high pressure system, on the other side. Now, in 24 in Ohio, there was not really a big bubble of high pressure. You just kind of had to get lucky. So when it was raining the night before, that's what you want. You want it to be passing you. So you guys did great.
I have a quick question on your point of greatest eclipse.
Yes.
Do they measure that down to, like, is it footage? Is it inches? Is it, half mile? I guess what do they constitute as that point of greatest eclipse?
So, that is a really good question. And it changes, the accuracy changes depending on where you are in the path. So the numbers are much more exact if you're right on the center line. And as you start to get to the edges of the path, there starts to become some error. But it's really probably less than a second or a second and a half, even at the edges of the path. It's really, really well calculated. Now, one other little nuance of that is there's the point of greatest eclipse, which is that line that we talked about that goes from the sun through the moon to the axis of the center of the earth. It's not really the center of the earth. It's a line in the center of the earth that
Right.
it meets it perpendicularly. And then there's the point of greatest eclipse. The point of greatest eclipse is a little different, and you'll see it on some of the maps. That takes into consideration the altitude or the altitude or the distance you're above sea level, to add or subtract a little bit of time from the calculated point of greatest eclipse. But it's usually less than a second. You don't really have to worry about it. So there are 2 points that you'll see on maps: the point of greatest eclipse, which is the mathematical one, and the point of greatest duration, which adds a little bit of time, and it can be off by, a mile to 10 miles or something. Fred Espinick has done the analysis on it, and I don't remember all the numbers, but yeah, you guys brought up some great points about 17 and 24. You did well.
Thank you. We were proud of our efforts in 24. We were actually took all the podcast equipment with us in the RV. That was the beauty of having like this mobile weather station / studio, and we felt like we would record every night while we were on our journey. Right. And the 2 days before, when we were in Perrysburg, we were still feeling like there's a lot open. The night before, when it was raining, we recorded, but I felt like it was a little more brief. We were all sort of stressed out. Sure. And then we recorded the afternoon after the eclipse, and it was just jubilation. We had music in the background. It was the Beatles were playing. It was just a special day. So yeah. Love that we beat the weather, and I'm glad that you guys did too. So yeah.
All right, you want to go to the next little part of the presentation?
Let's do it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Are you seeing it now?
Oh yeah, that's a beautiful photo right there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we actually did pretty well with photography in 24. So, this is one of those compiled photographs where it's probably, I just think, 4 shots of the corona and then putting a moon glow in there. And you can see that little prominence that everybody saw like at 5 o'clock down here, which was, really beautiful. And then this is the whole sequence of Bailey's beads coming into C2 and then going out of C3. So I love to do this shot where you take multiple sequences. You got to realize that this sequence at the front and this sequence at the back is happening in about 7 seconds. So that's really, you got to really be on it to do that.
That is awesome.
That's incredible. Yeah.
That's
and then I love this one because this shows the motion of the moon. So everybody saw this little prominence kind of during totality at the end, but you see at C2, it wasn't there because the moon was covering it, right? But over the 4 minutes of the eclipse, the moon is moving from west to east. So it's moving towards C2 and it made this beautiful prominence visible, which this is just these two shots just show the motion of the moon, during totality. It's moving a fair amount.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I remember
awesome.
that vividly.
Gordon, can you hit hide on that little bar that's at the bottom?
Sure. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that these photos are in their true beauty. Yeah. This is an incredible photo.
Yeah. So this was shot through a telescope with a digital camera on the back of the telescope. So it's shooting at prime focus using the telescope as the lens. So it's about a 1200 millimeter telescope, and it was a cropped sensor. So there's a 0.5 magnification factor on that. So it's basically shooting at about 1800 millimeters.
Wow.
Okay.
But here's what I want to talk about. This was really fun. What I did at this eclipse with Destin Sandlin from Smarter Every Day, he came to the eclipse with me. Let me talk about this. This is really interesting. So this is my photo of the setting eclipse in Argentina in 2019. So the eclipse was late in the afternoon. So it's set into the Andes Mountains, and actually, fourth contact was before the mountains. Behind the mountains. And so when you do something like this, you're taking these individual shots, and the solar filter is on for that. And then you take a picture of totality, and you put the solar filter back on, and you take the other individual shots, and then you put it together in Photoshop, right? So you do one of these at a time, and you layer them. So the technique for this is, we know at any eclipse that the ecliptic is the arc of the sun through the day, right? From morning to afternoon. But depending if you're in a morning eclipse or if you're in an afternoon eclipse, you're really only worried about that 3 hours of the day where your eclipse is for your position along the path, right? It's different in Mexico than it was in Maine, because Mexico is a morning eclipse. In Maine, it was an afternoon eclipse. So if you know your position of the sky, you know exactly where the sun is going to be between first contact and second contact. And it's going to take about 40 degrees for the sun to move, plus or minus a little bit. You're never going to cut it, that close. So my Eclipse Timer app has a part of the functionality where it will calculate the times. It'll calculate first contact, second contact, third contact, and fourth contact, but it will also give you the times where you should take a photo at this clock time, and it will separate out the partial phases for you, so you have a nice balanced, picture. So you're taking it at a timing sequence that will make it balanced for you. So here's the deal. This is what I wanted to do with Destin, because he's into film photography, and I knew that. We met for lunch one day, and I told him that I wanted to try to do this with him because he's into film photography. In the old days, before digital photography, and when you had to do this on film, guys used to take this sequence of eclipses just on film. You would take the entire sequence of the eclipse on one piece of film, because we didn't have Photoshop back then. So what Destin had to do, he had to find this camera, this old camera, that you can stop the film from advancing with each shutter opening. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
So the film doesn't advance when you click the shutter. It stays on the same piece of film. And so here's Destin and I, we're at the Eclipse site.
I like the outfits.
And we're wearing the multicolored shirts. That has to do with the Purkinje effect, which is a lighting thing. But here's the deal. This is what I want to show you. So when you're going to do this old technique on film, the reason it works is the first picture you take, you have the solar filter on. So even though you're opening the shutter, the solar filter is blocking 99.9% of the light. So the rest of the film doesn't get exposed. You've taken a picture, but it only exposes the little partial phase sun that's yellow coming through the solar filter. So you do that 10 times. And again, the rest of the film stays black because it's not seeing any light. Then you take your filter off just for totality, and you have to kind of pre-plan your exposure. And you take your totality picture without the solar filter on. Then you put your solar filter back on, and you take the rest of the partial phases with the solar filter on. And again, the film had more exposure during the totality picture because your solar filter was off, but the rest of it still is black because it only took totality. And then you don't put it together in Photoshop like you do nowadays. It's all on the same piece of film. It's amazing. Destin and I pulled this off, and nobody has done, nobody does this anymore. The last time it was done was probably 25 or 30 years ago. So one of the other little nuances I told Destin about is when you send film to a lab, the film processors, the computerized chemicals and all that, they have to have some kind of reference point. You just can't send them a black piece of film with a yellow dot on it because it won't know the exposure. So you always take what we used to call an index shot, which is a shot before the eclipse of the regular landscape where you are, the regular lighting. So when they load that film into the processor can read real numbers and real exposures. So if you look at this picture, this is slide or piece film number 1. Destin took a little picture of us for number 1. Then you advance the camera one time manually, and then you have the motor drive off so it will not advance with the next shutter clicks. And you see this is film piece number 2, and the whole eclipse is on one piece of film.
That is so cool.
That is absolutely incredible.
So this is a picture. Destin came to my house the night he got it developed, and he brought the negatives or the positives to my house. And this is me looking at that piece of film through a magnifying glass because it's really small. And see, that's that index picture over there on that same piece of film. And then here is the entire eclipse exposed on one piece of film. And, you've got to set up the camera to make sure that it's going to start at C1 and you're going to have enough room before you get to C4. So a lot of things have to be pre-planned, like when I was showing you that where the eclipse is going to be on the ecliptic. So Destin was really pumped, about doing this, and we pulled it off. And then he took that picture and he had it high definition scanned, and he printed it on metal so people could buy it from his website, Smarter Every Day. So there's the prints of it. And I bought one. I have one because I'm really, proud of it. So that's the old way of doing it.
That is incredible. I want to do that now.
Yeah.
I know it is an absolute insane amount of work to plan, but I feel like for Eclipse 3, maybe I'm up for the challenge. I cannot so I guess, does he still have the original piece of film? I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. What a keepsake. What a memento.
Yeah. I watched that video that he posted of that.
Right.
And then him showing you at your house. That was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly, I had plans to maybe take some photos, but
right.
I mean, just being my second eclipse, even there's just certain things that I was just noticing in my second eclipse that I didn't notice in the first eclipse, which was even just watching totality come towards you. It looked like a storm cloud headed towards you.
We had a great vantage point for that too, because we were looking out over a couple of farm fields, so you could it just looked like a storm coming at you.
And I feel like in 2017 we didn't even really look for that. We didn't know to look for it. And with the size of the umbra in this 2024 eclipse, it was definitely, we felt more noticeable, and the 360 camera captured that in just an incredible way. Obviously, the edited footage where you kind of go into post, and the nice thing with the 360 is you can grab anywhere and sort of record it in post. But if I just look at the raw footage from the 360, it's just to keep it straight looking forward, and watch that umbra come by and then hit us with totality and keep moving on. It it was incredible. But
I love that. And that's why my app, says, I think about 30 or 40 seconds before, or 20 seconds, I don't remember. It says, observe umbra approach. And that's one of the pre-planning points about an eclipse is looking at a map. And, I always tell people that you have to go to an eclipse site with a compass, because you have to know a couple of compass directions. The way you're going to be looking for totality might not be the way the umbra is approaching. You know what I mean? So you have to know which way you're going to look for that stuff. So that's a pre-planning thing too. But seeing the umbra approach, and then if you're in the proper position, seeing it leave over your back is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, truly an incredible experience. One that I feel glad also that we were able to share that with the people that were first timers, right? So while we were in some ways focusing on some more technical things like getting some photos through the telescope, that's something we didn't achieve of totality in 2017, but we did in 2024 because we had the ability to do that. We knew what was going on, but to be able to share, like, watch the umbra approach, watch the shadow bands, like, David was calling that out like left and right from your app. And so even those that were experiencing, like Nathan and others, most of us in our party were experiencing all of those additional things that we didn't necessarily get in the first one.
Yeah. No, every one you learn more and you get more out of it. The time slows down. They talk about professional athletes like that everything gets slower for them because they understand what's going on. It's the same thing with eclipses. You just get better at them.
Yeah. It's amazing. So
gotta go to more.
Gotta go to more.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
I was initially like, there's footage because I was carrying one of the phones or one of the GoPros, and there's footage I was taking, and I was so caught up in the moment that I didn't realize, like, David had taken his glasses off a good 10-15 seconds before I did, because I was just taking in like the moment. And then as soon as I took them off, it's just like this overwhelming emotion and feeling and everything. And then, my dad's shouting from the telescope, "Get over here, take a look at it." And I'm like, well, how much time we have left? How much, you're kind of panicking, which is, like, to your point, that's what happens in sports. Like if you're not comfortable, you're just panicking. You're one thing to the next. And it did help though. I got to slow down a bit and really take it in the second half of it, especially.
And even a 4-minute eclipse goes really quickly. It goes really quickly.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a special moment to share with others. And yeah, I don't know, like the pre and post eclipse partial phenomena that were occurring, a little more cognizant of that. I actually had gone to the October annular eclipse in San Antonio. And for that eclipse, because it was a little less stressful in terms of, we wanted to get some photos, but I was with some friends and it wasn't going to be like a full totality experience. I was able to pay more attention to some of those pre-eclipse phenomena, like the shadows that look like crescents, right? Or the partial eclipse. Like all of that was just special that I could then take into my totality experience for round two. And it's so true. Yeah. The more you learn about it, the more you practice it, whether it be reading about it or just preparing accordingly, you will improve your experience, I feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You want to go on to the next?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's do it.
So the next thing I wanted to talk about is some lighting effects. The eclipse, if you look at it, when the partial phases are progressing, it's decreasing the lighting. I mean, it's almost linear if you're looking at your observing site. But, our eyes and our brains have such a great ability to dark adapt when you're turning down the lights like that. I use the example in my talks. If you could be in a room with no windows, just a solid blank room with solid walls and ceiling, and somebody was standing there with a dimmer switch, and they could dim the light in the room over an hour and 10 minutes, that's basically what an eclipse does. And that gives your body such an amazing amount of time to dark adapt. So you don't even really know it's, getting dark till about 4 or 5 minutes before totality, because you just have such an ability for your eyes to adapt. One of the things that has always interested me about following more than just the lux decrease in an eclipse is because I was so interested in the Purkinje effect, which has to do with the way our retinas work as we're moving from day vision to night vision. I was wondering if this phase of the sun changes the percentage of the colors of light that reach the earth. And the reason I thought about that is the sun has different colors. So when you're seeing the full sun, the middle of the sun is more bright blue. It's at 6,300 Kelvin. But because the sun is a globe, it's not flat. As the photosphere wraps around the edges of this big ball, it gets more red at the edge. So when you're in an eclipse at the crescent phase, I was wondering what it does to the light, and is that what increases our kind of eerie lighting effect within that last 5 minutes of totality? And it turns out it does. And I did this first experiment in 2019 in Argentina, and the data was pretty good, but it wasn't great. So I wanted to do it again in 24. And so here it is. Let me explain it to you. So this is a 3-color monitor, red, green, and blue. And it starts at first contact at here. And you can see for the entire partial phases, as the sun is getting dimmer in terms of lux, the percent of color is the same. These add up to 100%. So this is the color bands for red, green, and blue, adding up to 100%. But you can see here about 14 minutes before C2, when we're coming into that crescent, the red starts to go up. So we are bathed in more red light during the last 10 minutes before totality. And then this is the color spectrum during totality. This is actually a little confusing to me. I have to analyze this a little more. I'm going to show you another slide. But to kind of put this in perspective, this is what I mean. So these two partial phase images are about 10 minutes before totality and after totality, using the timing of my app. So this is the 9th picture in the 10 pictures my app tells you to take, because the final picture is 2 minutes before C2, and it's a little crescent. So you can see when you're in this portion of the eclipse, you are actually getting bathed in more red light than normal. Now, the thing that's confusing about this, that first set of graphs is that 3-color sensor mounted on a telescope and pointing towards the sun. So the aperture is pointing directly towards the sun, and it's tracking the sun. So that was smoothly tracking the sun through the whole eclipse and watching those colors. I had another one going that was just mounted on a pole behind us, and this is facing horizontally at the observing site. So this is not pointing to the sun, it's pointing to where you would be looking under normal circumstances. So it's the color of the observing site. So that is different because it has, and I don't know how to explain it yet, it has some reflectivity of how your observing site is affecting the colors that the monitor is seeing. So it's a little different, and I've got to work on this. This is the first time I've done both of them at the same time. So I'll be honest with you, I don't know exactly what to make of it. And then this is it all put together. So this is the one pointing at the sun and just monitoring the lux. Don't worry about what's going on over here. And then this is the other one that was pointing towards the observing site and just monitoring the lux of the sun. So you can see that the observing site starts off at about 10,000 lux for both of them. And then it goes down. This eclipse went down to under 2 lux. But this color difference is something that's intriguing to me, and I've got to work on that a little bit more.
That's incredible. I think it is amazing to be able to, in a way, quantify the feeling that you feel, the eerie feeling as
Mm-hmm.
the eclipse is just about to begin, or sorry, the totality is just about to begin, and even after the totality is over with. In 2017, both of those things were prominent to us as new observers.
Right.
The latter, I remember as soon as the eclipse was done, everyone's cheering, everyone's clapping, and it just felt like there was this weird spotlight on you almost of
Right.
just the,
Yeah.
coming back in. So to be able to quantify that is incredible. Like,
Yeah.
absolute kudos to you for capturing that data and in a way that, like, that's the data, like, that's real. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, there is that moment where it's like it literally is like a switch being flipped, where the coloring it just gets almost very dim. Oh, it's just a weird, like almost like somebody just cranked down the lights, like you said, in a room, like a room with no windows, right before. I mean, in the last, like, I'd say last probably 5 minutes.
That's right.
It's just a weird, eerie feeling, and that's where you definitely notice the change. And it just to understand, like, obviously the fact that the sun is a sphere, and like just knowing all that kind of going into it, it's definitely good knowledge to have, I think, going forward. But
I think I had the live stream of us at about this point during the eclipse.
Yep.
And I described it as an amber tint,
Mhm.
as if you had an amber tint lens on your glasses.
Yep.
And but the interesting thing is what David said is that, if you were to just throw on an amber tint in regular lighting, it would almost bring out more color or more contrast, in surrounding areas. But in this situation, it dims it all together. Like, you've got the amber tint, and then it dims everything, in the surrounding area, which was, it's a sensation that I've never experienced before. And I don't think you can replicate that kind of lighting situation.
You can't. That is one of the most unique lighting experiences that you can actually ever experience. And that was what interested me about looking at the percentage of colors changing during the deep crescent phases. Because in 2017, I saw an amazing Purkinje effect. I saw it in 24 too, but not as much as in 17. And I wanted to understand it more. So let's talk a little bit about the Purkinje effect and what you were talking about. You were calling it amber, which is fine. Most people say it's like looking through very light silver glasses because everything gets more of a gray tone. And here's why. When you're in bright light on a normal day, or in your house on a normal day, in the back of your eye, in your retina, you have 3 sets of cones cells. Those are the light absorbing cells, and they absorb in 3 colors, and then your brain processes that to be the colors that you see. But they take a lot of photons to fire. They take a lot of photons to make an electrical impulse to your brain. So that's your day vision. But in night vision, if you go out at night and you dark adapt, you can start to see pretty well, but things are in black and white. Now, the reason you can see pretty well with night vision is because now you're switching to what we're calling your rod cells. And rod cells are very sensitive to light. They can generate an impulse with 1 or 2 photons. And a lot of rod cells are hooked up together to the same axon that goes to your brain. So they gather a lot of light, but they only absorb in 1 frequency of color, kind of in the green blue. So your brain processes that as black and white. So the way to understand that is if you go out in your front yard during the day, you see green, you see all the colors. But if you go out in your front yard at night and you dark adapt and it's dark out, the colors are still there. They didn't go away. You just don't see them because your eyes and your brain can't process it. Well, now, there's that little zone of transition between being in what's called photopic vision, which is daytime vision, and nighttime vision, which is scotopic vision, and it's called mesopic vision. And it's transition. I'm going to show you a slide about this. It's the transition between your cones being able to work to see colors, but now the lighting is getting so dim that they're not working great anymore. And your rods sensing that it's getting darker, so they start to work more. But remember, they're black and white. So in that last 3 to 5 minutes before an eclipse, you start to see things with less contrasting color, less brilliant color, especially the reds. The reds start to look gray, and that's called the Purkinje effect. And I saw it really well in 17, and that's what inspired me to actually look at the colors of the sun. So the other thing that's making it look so eerie for you is the fact that you're starting to be bathed in more red light than normal. And I noticed that at the annular eclipse in 23, because the annular eclipse stayed very bright. But right before annularity and right after annularity, I noticed it was dimmer. But I don't think I noticed it was dimmer because I know how much lux decrease it takes from a total eclipse to know when you really think it's dimmer. What I really think I was seeing was the red. I was just seeing that things were getting more red. And one other thing, Nathan, that you talked about, I wanted to touch on. So during totality, especially I'm going to show you a slide of this, your pupils are dilating right as you get to totality. And during totality, even for that 4 minutes, you can dark adapt just a little bit. When C3 hits, your pupils are dilated, your retinas are dark adapted, and then all of a sudden the sun comes back. So that's why it looks so brilliant after C3, where you fade into the dimming light into C2, then you're dark adapted, and then all of a sudden it gets tremendously bright. And that's why you don't see as much of a Purkinje effect after C3 than you do going into C2, because you're just so dark adapted. It's like being in a dark room and somebody turning on all the lights.
This is right up my alley. So
yeah,
Gordon, I work within eye care. I sell all the kind of the products in the operating room for cataract surgery. Yeah. So I understand the ocular system pretty well, but it's really these are things that I didn't take into consideration going into totality. That
sure,
that, you're gonna get this mesopic effect, and you're gonna lose some of that contrast sensitivity. So it's really cool to. Like you just amaze me how you take a deep dive on all these different aspects of it that for me going into it, I just didn't think of. It's quite interesting.
Oh, it's complex. I mean, nobody can get everything out of their first or second eclipse. I mean, you just can't. You guys, I think I sent you a copy of my book. So my book is the best preparatory book for these kind of partial phase phenomena out there, because I'm so into it. I've written entire chapters just on these partial phases so people can prepare for the eclipse. And, I got great feedback on my book too. It helped a lot of people enjoy the eclipse.
Yeah, the book was incredible. And thank you again for sharing it. It was certainly something we used to prepare and just get as ready as we possibly could. Right there. Right. We said it before. I think when the first time we had you on the show, and several times after, we continued to tell our listeners that there is no better resource to get ready for an eclipse than your book, because it not only tells all of these details, but it sets you up for success with even just how to plan. Right. So it gives you the human element too, the element that maybe the experts wouldn't understand right away, or so it leads you in such a way. So in my mind, as far as eclipse preparation goes, it is a masterpiece. It's the perfect guide. And I think we talked about that a little bit. There's these eclipse books that you can check out from the library that are so detailed. Right. You open it up to the second page and it's over your head.
Right.
Your book leads people in exactly the right way. So it is something to be added to the toolkit, as we said, for the resident eclipse chasers that are listening.
Well, I appreciate that. I wrote that book for families to enjoy the eclipse, to prepare for eclipse day. And you can go as deep as you want in that book, or you can read the superficial stuff. Generally, the chapters kind of go in order. They start out superficial and they get more and more complex. The other thing that I'm proud of with that book, and I don't really know when it occurred to me, but I think of eclipses because of Solar Eclipse Timer. I think of it in order. So that's why I wrote that book where the chapters follow the order of the eclipse. You're reading the chapter that has to do with the part of the eclipse that's happening. So that also lets people learn about the eclipse in kind of this sequential order, which just makes them be prepared to enjoy it better.
Yeah. There's just so much that's going on in such a short window of time.
Yeah, it's brutal.
That you just yeah. I mean, it's especially the first two times. Like I'm sitting over here thinking, okay, I've been to 2 eclipses. I'm a veteran, but that's actually very, very much not true. I mean, I've got to go to 15 more eclipses just to get on par with what I need to actually know and what's gonna and be able to anticipate what's gonna happen and take in everything that's gonna happen. But that, your senses are going crazy because you're sensing things and seeing things that you've just never seen before and that you're never going to see in any other circumstance other than a total solar eclipse. But just, that your book is like the Bible of eclipses, of just knowing why am I sensing this and what to look for when. And that's just, it's awesome. Like, and same with the app too. The app just, while your senses are going crazy, it's basically like an alarm clock going off. So saying, hey, pay attention to this each step of the way, it was great. Even though I did a poor job at announcing what was happening after you were saying in your app,
and the companionship of the book and the app together. I mean, that those two things paired and coupled in one it's paramount for all of those that are listening right now. If you are planning on seeing the eclipse in 2026, 27, 28, that's the pairing you need, is the book and the guide, auditory guide, essentially.
And I think what they both do is give you an advantage in being able to slow the time down. Because you're well prepared. You can take it in. You're really experiencing everything and noticing everything at that time. It's just like what we talked about, like things slow down the more prepared and the more experienced you are, whether it's sports or eclipses. You've given the tools to kind of help the general audience slow things down so they understand what's happening and can really take everything in.
It's like the in the professional athlete example that you give, reading the book at some level and pairing it up with the app gets you to the top of the draft boards for the NBA. Like you are a top prospect for eclipse chasing because you've prepared yourself accordingly in a way that is not all that complex. Like the details of what you're explaining, of course, they're complex. There's a lot of an incredible amount of work and energy that goes into this. And I can't thank you enough for doing that for the world, essentially. I mean, no one else is doing this to the level you are. And so to pair that up in a way that's digestible in a book format and then in an auditory format that, as David said, shouts out what exactly you're looking for in the moment when you're so excited, is just, it's incredible. It gets me so excited to see the next one.
Well, I appreciate it. All right, let's go to the next little thing.
Yes, let's do it.
Let's see. Are you seeing this now?
Yep.
Okay, so this is one of the things I was talking about. There's a guy in the United Kingdom. His name is Andrew Stockton. He's a PhD that studies the biology of lighting and colors. And when I found his charts on this, I was like blown away. It just was so helpful to me. So I put the eclipse lighting in here. But basically what he has is, from bright light to dark light, what your pupil is going to do, and going through the photopic zone to the mesopic zone, the scotopic zone of vision. And then I added this to his graph, which just talks about the retina function. So cone function is going down, like I talked about. Rod function is going up. And there's this little point in between, which is the mesopic zone, right before totality, that last 5 minutes, where you get the Purkinje effect. And that's why I told everybody for this eclipse to wear red and green shirts, so you see how those colors get affected by the Purkinje effect. And of course, the strongest is that the red becomes more bland. So I did this experiment at the eclipse, and I don't think this has ever been done before. Again, to take the ambient lighting to the next level, I built this little rig that held my son's face in the same position each time. And I had the camera all locked in. So when he put his chin and his forehead up against this rig, his eyeball was in the same position. And I took pictures of his pupil during the progression of the partial phases to see if I could document his pupil dilating with the decrease in lux. And what's so interesting about this is you see his pupil is constricted through, these first 8 pictures, because most of the work for dark adaptation does not have to do with pupil dilation. It has to do with the biochemistry of your retina. So this is his first pupil diameter here. This is the 8th picture. And if you could put a caliper on that, you might see that that's a millimeter bigger. And that matches what Professor Stockman, talked about. But you can definitely see his pupil at picture 9 is dilated. This is about 10 minutes before totality, okay? So the lux is 2,800 lux, and his pupil is dilated. So you're finally getting to the point where your body understands it needs more light. Because as the lux is going down, your eyes and your brains are working hard to try to properly expose your surroundings for you. So most of it is done early on with your retina, and right at the end, your pupil kicks in and dilates to let that last little bit of light on, to try to fight to be able to have you have properly exposed surroundings. So between about 10 minutes and 15 minutes before totality is when your pupil, starts to kick in. And again, this was really fun to do. It's very stressful to take the time out to do this. I would take a partial phase picture on all my cameras and then run over and get my son in the rig and take the pictures of his eyeball. And but it worked out great in the end, and I was really happy to get this data.
That's incredible.
That is awesome. Yeah.
So incredible, and just the level of detail, the curiosity to want to know how this works and how it functions, because that's the beauty of the eclipse, right? We are humans, and we are absorbing this as we are, and
Right.
and so to capture the biology of what's happening there is just so special.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I would say that the other thing I would add to that is the one thing I noticed through the phases of totality was that leading up to that kind of 10-minute window, like you said, Gordon, before totality, you're kind of in this like in between phase. Like for me, I have very sensitive eyes, so I wear sunglasses almost all the time. And up until that 10-minute window, it was like on off, and then finally you get to enough of a mesopic light condition where it's like, okay, off, and let's let our eyes work.
Right.
And then you really feel like the change in lighting. It was an interesting experience.
Yeah. The ability of the body to dark adapt is amazing. It truly is amazing. The retina and the brain and the pupil function is crazy. It's crazy cool. And I was so happy to pull off that pupil experiment.
That's very impressive. I can't wait to share this all with like my coworkers and our training department, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the ocular geeks of the world.
Yeah,
right? The people that will appreciate it. Yeah, it's a special level of detail that you bring to eclipses, and yet in still a very digestible way. And so I feel like that's a superpower of yours. Like you just have this way of making these incredible phenomena that are occurring, whether it's visually, whether it's how you feel, all of the above, and make it something that can be brought down to the everyday lad. It's
I
good.
appreciate that. Yeah, that's what I try to do. Yeah. All right, I'm going to geek you guys out with one more thing.
Yes,
let's go.
Let's go.
The other thing that happens during eclipses, which is fascinating, we talked about the partial phases decreasing the lighting, but the partial phases are also decreasing the radiant energy that's reaching the Earth. So everybody, it's really fun to feel the temperature drop, during the partial phases. And the reason is, about 50% of energy that comes from the sun actually, makes it to the Earth. A lot is reflected, by the atmosphere. But that's what causes our weather. That's what causes our temperature changes. That's what causes the seasons. And that's what causes the temperature change during an eclipse. So I've monitored the temperature at an eclipse a number of times. I had a really big temperature drop in 2019 in Argentina. But again, because this was 2024 and I could travel with a lot of gear, I took temperature monitoring kind of to the next level. And this is crazy. I know it, but I'm going to talk about it. So I built this tower out of PVC pipe where I could put these little temperature monitors called thermocrons at different levels, because I wanted to document the radiant energy being delivered to the Earth during an eclipse. So there's 5 sensors. One is buried in the ground under a little bit of kind of sand and a little coffee grounds mixed together to kind of get like a light tan color like soil. And the thermocron was under like a millimeter of that color. And then there were thermocrons hung in these little cages to allow airflow, but the cage was pointed towards the sun, so no direct energy could hit the thermocron. The cage would reflect, the sunlight, and this was hanging behind it. And I took temperature measurements at 6 inches above the ground, 5 feet above the ground, which would be kind of like what you would feel on your face, then 10 feet above the ground, and then 20 feet above the ground. And my concept here was to try to document a mini inversion effect, and I was able to do it. So let me get to that. But here, this is the ground sensor. So this is the one that's on the ground in that little light brown covering of sand and coffee grounds mixed together. So you'd see the ground temperature was 86 degrees. And you can see as the sun is heating the ground, even though the partial phases are, this is in the morning. I'm sorry. This is in the morning when I set up the sensor. So this is 2 hours before C1. This is 1 hour before C1. And then this is C1. Okay. So this is the beginning of the eclipse. The ground heating of this sensor got to 113 degrees. Now look at the ground temperature drop, just like we saw lux drop with lighting. Because remember, the radiant energy of the sun that is warming us is also dropping basically at the same rate as the lighting, because the sun is getting blocked, right? So it dropped down to a ground temperature, the lowest of 70 degrees. And then after the eclipse, it kind of goes back up. And then I monitored it for 2 hours after. Now, there's a lot of data here, but let me just show you the curves, and then I'll get to the important point. This blue line is that ground sensor that I told you got up to 113 degrees.
What time of day was that?
So my eclipse was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon to 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
All right.
So then this orange line right here is 6 inches above the ground. And then these 3 lines, the gray line is at your face, the yellow line is, or the gold line is 10 feet, and the other blue line is 20 feet above the ground. So here's what I want you to see on this one. So the ground temperature goes up a lot and drops down, but look at how the 6-inch air temperature kind of followed that. So right at the ground, at 6 inches above the ground, the temperature of the ground was affecting that sensor. But the ones at 5 feet and 10 feet above the ground, they're far enough above the ground that there's enough air mixing that they don't get affected directly by that ground temperature change. So this is, that part of the eclipse when the temperature is rising, the ground temperature is rising, but these are staying the same. But what I wanted to demonstrate was this part right here. So the ground temperature dropped, and the temperature at 6 inches above the ground followed it. But the temperature readings at 5 feet, 10 feet, and 20 feet stayed higher than the temperature at the ground. So this is a little mini inversion effect, that the air above you does not get affected as quickly as the air down at the ground, unless there's a lot of wind and air mixing. So if there's a lot of air mixing, this probably wouldn't have been as clear. But I had good calm conditions, so I was able to document this mini inversion effect, that the temperatures at 5, 10, and 20 feet were not representative of what's happening at the ground. I was really excited to do this. I actually practiced this technique at the annular eclipse because I wanted to work out some bugs. I didn't go with the 20-foot pole, obviously, because I had to fly there, but I jerry-rigged something at our site to get a sensor about 9 feet off the ground, just to kind of test that this was a concept that I could pull off. And it worked great at the 24 eclipse. So basically that's the end of the stuff that I wanted to talk to you guys about.
That's interesting to me because you definitely feel the air temp dropping.
You do.
In looking at your graph, you're kind of wondering, at least I am, is that more the radiant heat from the soil, or is that the actual air? But it just raises the question for me because we were at a point where in the morning we were bundled up,
right,
and then leading up to C1 and C2, it was still probably, I don't know, it was above 70 degrees or right around 70 degrees, and then it became like, okay, I got to throw another layer on it during totality.
Right.
But is that more an effect of the ground temperature lowering or the air temperature?
So that is really complex. Every eclipse site will behave a little bit differently, depending on the humidity, the sun angles, how much wind mixing is going on. I have to say, and it's represented in that data, I didn't feel the temperature get as cool at this eclipse as I did in 17 and certainly 19 in Argentina. And the data, kind of show that. But remember, these sensors, a lot of times you can feel the temperature changing like in your mid body or your hands or your face, you can feel it. My one sensor, this was about 50 feet behind our observing position in a field that actually had different level grass. I mean, we were observing in a mowed field, so it was flatter, and that's going to behave a little bit differently than when you have these sensors set up where the grass is 10 inches high. So all of those things affect it. And everybody senses temperature a little bit, differently. But generally during an eclipse, you will feel the temperature go down. I mean, normally at your chest and face level for a regular eclipse, it'll be between 5 and 10 degrees. It's not, usually dramatic. In 2019 in Argentina, because we were there at the winter solstice, and it was a low setting eclipse, I had a 24-degree Fahrenheit drop in temperature there. That was really dramatic. You don't usually see that. So every observing site is going to be a little different, but generally you're going to have at least 5 to some range of 5 to 10 degrees.
Yeah, I would say for sure, like in my opinion, I think 2017, well, I mean, first off, it was August and we were in, a very humid, hot
right,
part of the
100
country.
degrees, yeah.
And I think I noticed it more there. the temp drop there in 2017 versus April 8th of 2024. I definitely noticed it being a little bit cooler at totality, but 2017 it was like we were sweating at 9 a.m. and then all of a sudden it just cooled right off. It was incredible the way that the temp changed, but yeah,
it's awesome. It's that human element again, like that's like the common thread, right? The way that you visualize this, the way you feel it on your skin, the things you hear in your ears, it's what makes an eclipse special.
Yep.
And it's something that you cannot replicate anywhere else but this. And I think that's what that exclusivity of it, naturally, physically, the things that are happening in the solar system to make this all become a reality are what we try to promote to our listeners, is in building that enthusiasm from when we started this in 2017, getting back to the state of Michigan where we live. And, there was a pretty good partial there in the low 80s, I believe, in 2017. And people just were like, yeah, it was cool. Yeah. Like I saw like the light get a little dimmer, and we just couldn't believe that there was this disconnect, I guess, in what we experienced, this jubilant feeling we felt. And so it was our mission to just spread the word in any way we could. And so to be able to partner with you and couple this incredible detail in a way that's digestible to our listeners, I think is just, I cannot thank you enough for what you're doing, I guess, for the eclipse world, for people that just want to experience something that's unlike anything else.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And appreciate you guys reaching out to me and working with me to do it. I love doing this stuff.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The big question, I think, is next eclipse, right? 2026 through the south of Ireland and into the tip of the south of Spain.
Yes.
27 going through that south of Spain, through the Middle East, through Egypt, and then in 2028 going through in a very similar fashion to what we just saw in the U.S., but replace the U.S. with Australia.
Right.
What are your plans?
Yeah, so I'm making plans for 26 to go to Spain. I don't know where yet. I'm actually looking at some potential viewing sites on the island of Mallorca, on the east side of Spain. I'm working on all of that stuff right now. So I'm going to do that one on my own because that's relatively safe. And I'll bring a small group of people along with me for that. And then for Egypt, I'm already signed up for a tour. I mean, I can't do Egypt on my own. I don't understand that country. I don't know what the risks are. So I'm signed up with an Egyptian eclipse tour, and I've actually done a little bit of work to help them pick their site and do a little bit of eclipse, observing site preparation. But they're an experienced an experienced Egypt tour company that is adding this tour because of the eclipse, because normally they wouldn't do tours in the middle of the summer because it's going to be 110 degrees. So that's the slow season for them to do Egypt tours. But of course, they're doing it to take advantage of the eclipse. And then I haven't made any, plans out to Australia yet.
Awesome. Yeah. For us, we're sort of looking at like 26 as maybe a stretch goal, something that if all the cards fall correctly and we can make it happen, then great. And 27, maybe a little bit of the same, but 2028, we actually, so with Eclipse on Tap, the three of us are all passionate cyclists as well.
Right.
So there was a period of time where, David was a former professional cyclist. Nathan was an elite cyclist. I sort of got into it as I got a little bit older, and we got to a point where we were all sort of racing for a team that wasn't us. And we recognized why we're all getting a little older. Why shouldn't we just create a cycling team that's Eclipse on Tap, right? And we can build partnerships in different ways. So we've done that. And I think just recognizing the community we built there, shout out to a couple of our cycling teammates who are Australian, one's from Tasmania, and then the others from kind of the southeast side of the continent. We have some connections for 2028, and we're really excited that we can, we're going to try to make 2028 a very similar experience to 2024, where it's all in, big group, kind of settle in, and just really make it happen. If 26 and 27 happen with a smaller group, or maybe just a couple of us get to go, then that's a cherry on the top. But 28 is going to be just our all-in experience.
Yeah, in fact, the gentleman that joined us at Totality this year, Gary, his family is Australian. he said they've got a farm, they've got plenty of places for us to camp and hang out. 2028, we'll put it out there, Dr. Telepun.
Yeah, if you
join
wanna,
us, join us on the farmland.
Farm connections.
Or I'll go with you to Egypt. How about that?
Yeah, let's do
on
the Egypt tour.
So the Egypt tours are almost all filled up. It's crazy. So in the back of my book, I have the next 10 eclipses, and so 28, is this one, like you said, which crosses Western Australia and goes over Sydney. Now, a lot of people are going to go to Sydney for that eclipse because Sydney is in the path. I don't want to do that. See this little red dot up here? That's the point of greatest eclipse for that eclipse. Now, I would like to get to that. I don't know what kind of outback country is up there. I have to do a little bit more investigation to see if you can actually get to this point of greatest eclipse safely. But I think I want to stay away from Sydney for that eclipse.
Yeah, well, we have some connections that could definitely fill you in. Some Australian natives, so would love to partner with you on that. Some folks that, they know Australia. It's in their blood.
So, that would be a cool one. So, look, if we did that, what we need is these outback guys who have 4-wheel drive trucks or whatever and can get us out into kind of the desert or whatever they call it there, and see if we can get to the point of greatest eclipse. That's what we would do. We would all stand there, and at max eclipse, we would face at the azimuth of max and lean in the angle of the axis of the moon, and we would be lined up to the sun. It would be great.
It's incredible, especially in Australia. Let's do it.
Let's plan on it.
Let's make it happen. We have enough time, right? It's 2025. We've got.
I don't have any contacts in Australia. Now, let me just tell you one thing about 26. That picture I showed you of the setting eclipse in Argentina, where C4 was below the horizon, there are a lot of opportunities to do that in Spain because Spain is at the end of the path. So those things that I talked about, I wouldn't try to do it with film like we did with Destin. That just adds a whole layer of complexity. But I would do a wide angle lens, and I would, read how to do it in my book. And we could do a talk on it if you want to. We can do a session just on how to do wide angle photography. And that would be a great one to set up a setting eclipse with fourth contact below the horizon. It's wonderful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the dynamic qualities of 2026 and some of our listeners that have kind of tuned in and felt this enthusiasm, whether they went to 2024 or not. I know we have another cycling teammate, shout out to Mike Van Houten. He's talking about going to 2026 in Spain. So would love to do that with you and partner up on something that could be beneficial to Spain visitors for 2026. And then, it's incredible. We're getting 3 in a row globally. And I know the 3 of us have talked, we got lucky with 2017, 2024, having 2 within that relatively short span in the United States, but we're ready to take this thing global. We're ready. We're there.
Well, so, that's the thing. The United States was really lucky that we had 17 and 24. Within 7 years, we had 2 eclipses and you didn't have to travel internationally. But now we're to the point where if you're hooked, you have to start to go international. And look, the weather in Spain is actually pretty good. I wouldn't go up on the coast because you have the ocean weather. That would be a problem. So I'd either be in the mainland, just north east of Madrid, or going down towards the other coast, but I would stay on the mainland. The one thing you have to worry, it's really mountainous northeast of Madrid, and you have to make sure that your line of sight will be okay for the eclipse too. So there are some nuances to 26, but it could make for some beautiful photography.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I know with having said all of us are passionate cyclists, you said Mallorca was a potential destination.
Yeah.
Mallorca is sort of a world-class destination for cycling. So maybe we could pair it up.
Oh, I didn't know.
Oh yeah.
It is.
A lot of the professionals that race the Tour de France and the World Tour, they'll move to Majorca or certainly train there over the winter. Yeah, it's
interesting.
It is a spot that is world class for cycling. So yeah, I just love I love being able to share to our listeners about trying to plan for this and being able to pair it up with something like this presentation that you've shared with us, the conversation that we've been able to have here today. I think I just can't tell you how grateful I am for it, and just thank you so much for being on episode 83. Yeah, it's been incredible.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do it. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Long time coming. I mean, we're almost at 1 year anniversary.
Yeah, 1 year anniversary for 2024, and yeah, I just appreciate all the detail and the effort you put in, and I think that can't go understated, right? The amount of effort that you're putting towards this is sublime, like just unbelievable amounts of effort, and I feel like if it's not clear to our listeners, that definitely needs to be called out, and so kudos to you for all of that. Just wishing you, of course, the best success for the next few eclipses, and would love to make 2028 happen with you.
Yeah, let's plan for 2028 together out in the Outback.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got our Australian connections. Carl, Gary, let's get to it.
Yeah,
let's get out on the Outback.
And I wanted to thank you guys too for doing this in the video format, because it just helped to talk about this stuff. We couldn't do this just audio, and I knew you guys had a YouTube channel, so thanks for going through the effort of getting it all organized.
Well, it opens our eyes to what is possible now, right? So David and I started this podcast in 2017. Nathan joined us, I think, in 2020, 2019, something like that. And it's just sort of grown. I mean, David and I started it with a small little Samson Go mic that was designed for enhancing your work calls, right? There's a tiny little mic, and it's elevated to a level where we're just ready to take that next step. So you sort of inspired us, I think, to reevaluate what video could be on a podcast like this. We found StreamYard, so shout out to them for what we've been able to do here today, live transition the slides. That just wasn't possible even just a few years ago. So just thrilled for it. I think it's going to help us elevate ourselves. So just appreciate the connection so much. But we'll round out episode 83 here in the month of February of 2025. And thank you so much, Gordon. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, serious. This is awesome. Thank you.
No, thank you guys. I'm happy to do it. I'll do it anytime, whatever Eclipse subject you guys want to talk about. It's easy for me to put talks together. I have all this material. Throwing a PowerPoint presentation together is not hard.
Awesome. And just another shout out. I'm going to throw it up on the screen once more for our visual listeners, but where our listeners can find your app.
Yeah, so www.solareclipsetimer.com is my main website, which has the links to get to the app, either Google or Apple, the links to get to the book, either Google or iPad, or even a PDF version. And remember, for your bilingual folks, the app has a Spanish setting. If your phone's in Spanish, the Spanish app plays. And my book is available in Spanish for both of the electronic versions, not in the PDF version. And I'll be writing an update to the book, adding all this data that we talked about today in the new book. So I'll start to work on that. And the app right now does not have the 2026 data set in it. That stopped at 2024, but we're redeveloping the app now, that when you open it up, it will be ready for 2026. The other ones will be in there in case you want to go back and look at your old site or something like that, but they'll be on a back page. But the app will basically be dedicated to 2026, so there's no confusion about what eclipse you're supposed to pick to time.
That's awesome.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
Yeah, I put it up on the screen there for our visual listeners, solareclipsetimer.com. And for Eclipse on Tap, you can follow us on the social media platforms, really any of them, Instagram, X, Facebook, at Eclipse on Tap. And listen to this podcast, episode 83 on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, really wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to give us a like or a review. Certainly worthy. Gordon, your work is worthy of a like or review. Absolutely. So appreciate so much of your time and your energy and just what you bring to this eclipse chasing world. You are a gem, and we just can't thank you enough.
I thank you guys. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
We'll see you, Gordon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.